Hello, Internet user. My name is Gary of Gary's Wares. I make wooden pipes out of exotic hardwoods. Dylan over at Dylan's DIY Workshop clued me into this contest called the No Lathe Pen Challenge. And the challenge is to make a pen without using a lathe, and the grand prize, somewhat ironically, is a lathe. So I've got a design in mind, and I think it's alright. You see, I'm a simple man with simple needs, but I also have a simple income, and I simply need more tools. I think a lathe would fit in real nice around here. But the question is, will my pen be good enough? Let's find out! So here's the video they made for the contest. See, they just cannibalize a pen, take the ink cartridge out. And this is a neat idea. They put the pen at the end of the handle of a hammer. Their methods are somewhat questionable, I'd say. That looks like a bit of brass rod. And they're drilling the hole for the ink cartridge. They're widening it. See, a little unsafe. A little long. Haha. So there it is. I think this design has some issues because, well, first of all, I was thinking about it. If it's a hammer, it's going to be vibrating a lot, and the mortise might pop that pen part out. Ooh, I want that. I want the lathe. Ooh. I actually have a lathe. I did a review on it. It's not that powerful, and I really want a bigger one. I mean, it's more of a toy than a tool, but it does help in introducing my YouTube videos. First thing I'm going to do is make a laminate. I've got some scrap pieces that are ready to be planed. This is Purple Heart and this is Wenge. This side is ready to go, but this side needs some serious attention. I'll be planing these on a belt sander using this jig, and it's a little small for how wide this is, so I'm going to glue this together first before I plane the other side. I've also got this big mark here from I don't know what. Anyway, I'm going to need it, and I'm going to cut it off here and do the thing. So let's get to the plan. If there's one thing that my misspent days of high school taught me, is how a pen works, because I spent all class reassembling and disassembling pens. I took this pen apart for the ink cartridge, but I didn't want to throw the spring away because there's a lot of stuff you could do with springs. And so my plan is this. I'm going to make a bolt action pen like this. This you can get from Woodcraft. This is sort of like something I've done before. I made my dad a toothpick holder for Christmas. It's held together by this little peg and slot. That's what it looked like halfway through production. The pen is going to have something like this. So after carefully measuring the ink cartridge, I determined the design that I'm going to do. From the laminate, I'm going to make 8 segments that I'm going to drill a 1/4-inch hole through. At the bottom is going to be a tip made of ebony with a mortise and tenon connection here. And so when the cartridge is down into the pen, the spring rests up against the tip, and when it's engaged, it goes through like that. Like that. Woo! This segment here is going to be drilled with a 3/16" hole to sort of corral the ink cartridge inside the pen so it doesn't go anywhere. This 1/4-inch hole is going to make way for the ink cartridge, but also a dowel with a removable metal rod. This rod is going to act like that dowel did on the toothpick holder. Also, I'm going to make little decorative laminates to go on the top of the rod and the top of the bolt. So the bolt's going to go down, it's going to push the ink cartridge out to a certain point, and then it's going to go over to a slot, and it's going to stay there, and you'll be able to click, and it'll go up, and click it down, and everything like that. So let's get started. I went ahead and glued the laminate because it was pretty much ready to go. So I'm going to start off by making the tip out of this piece of ebony. I'm going to drill a 3/8" tenon with this 3/8" tenon cutter. After that, I'm going to drill a 1/8" hole through the center of the tenon down to 3/8 inch, and then I'm going to complete it with a 3/32" hole. I took a piece of scrap wood and I drilled a bunch of holes and labeled them to make sure that the holes that are drilled are the proper size. An 1/8 inch hole allows this segment of the ink cartridge to go through pretty well, far past what I need it. And a 3/32" hole allows the tip to go through, but it stops right here at this segment. So that's what these holes are about, and they need to be drilled fairly precisely because I want just the very tip of this, just to where it stops the bevel. I just want that exposed when the pen is engaged. So this has to be drilled pretty precisely. I'm going to do it all on my drill press. So here it is after drilling. After everything was drilled, I cut the blank to a 1/2 inch. Then with a scroll saw, I cut along the outside diameter of the tenon cutter leaving this. The tip will be shaped with a rotary tool, so if I want to dial it back a little bit, I can. Alright, so far so good. Now to the laminate. The laminate pieces have been glued. Before I go on, this wood is called Wenge, not Wenge. Wenge. So now I'm going to plane the back side. Making a laminate is kind of a hassle. It's a bit of a project within a project. So if you want to start off with a 3/4 inch stock or even an inch with this project, go right ahead. I'm going to do something a bit more challenging. First off, if you're using a belt sander, you want to use a very low grit belt. This is 32 grit. And it's very aggressive, very nasty, but it leaves a very flat surface. Planing small pieces on a belt sander can be a problem because that can happen. So I made a jig like this. It's got a little ledge that you could put pieces in and plane them. The big piece is not going to be a problem, but the smaller pieces are going to be a little trickier. If you'd like to use double-sided tape on this, it might be a good idea. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take this side and put it right up against the belt and just kiss it just a bit, and it should give it just the right amount. And it won't take much. I've also found that cabinet scrapers make an excellent diagnostic tool to figure out how flat a piece is. And I use this with a belt sander to make sure that the surface you have is flat enough to be hand sanded. So I'm going to plane these sides and come back. The planing is done, and that took no time at all. In my last video, I tried to plane laminate pieces by hand. And I'm finished. It only took me 3.5 hours. Yeah, 3.5 hours. That was obviously not the best way to do things. But the 32 grit sanding belt really does the job not only well, but fast. So unless you want to do a lot of this, use a low grit belt for planing. The big piece is going to be cut into 3 sections, and that's going to be the pen blank. This is going to be the decorative topper that's going to go on the bolt, and the final shape is going to be square. And this is going to be the decorative thing that's going to go on the end of the rod, and it's going to be roundish. So now to cut the pieces on my scroll saw, glue it up, clamp it, and wait for it to dry. The glue is dried. I squared the sides of the pen blank, and now it's ready to be cut into segments. With the bolt topper, I decided to get fancy. What I've done is I've glued the laminate pieces in such a way so that the corners kind of overlap. And you see how that makes kind of like a twist. Well, this is one of the pipes that I made in my last video. The topper is going to have a twist like this. It's going to be a little different because this started off square and this is a bit more rectangular, but it's going to look cool right on the top of the pen. And so when the bolt slides over, this is going to rotate and it's going to look dope. And this is going to go on the rod. I'm going to wait until these two are glued into place before I shape them because they're such small pieces. So now to divide the pen stock into 8 segments. The stock has been divided into 8 segments, the ends have been squared, and a line has been drawn between each of the corners of each segment. These segments are going to make up the barrel of the pen, and they're all going to have a 1/4 inch hole in them, except for that one. That one's going to have a couple of weird holes in them. So, all of these, except for that one, are going to get drilled. The pen segments have been drilled. If you have a segment come apart on you like this one did on me, all you have to do is sand the gluing surfaces lightly and clamp it and re-drill the hole and it should be good. It needs to be re-squared, but other than that, it's good to go. And this was totally avoidable. When you drill these, put them in the vise in the direction that they were clamped when the laminate was put together, and that will keep the pieces from coming apart. Next, I'm going to drill the mortise segment from this piece here. Even though the plan called for a tenon that was a 1/4 inch long, this is actually 5/16, so in other words, just short of that. And so that's the depth that I'm going to drill on this. Then I'm going to drill a 3/16 inch hole through the rest. The mortise has been drilled, and that went off all right, but when I went to drill the 3/16 inch hole, things went crazy. I'm not real sure what went wrong, because I started drilling right in the center of the Forster bit hole, but it came out off center, and then I tried to correct it, and then things just, man, it's a mess. But that's okay, that's not that crucial. All this part does is kind of keep the spring and ink cartridge in one place, and it's okay if it's not that clean. This is kind of a relief. I was waiting for something to go wrong. But one thing that's a disappointment is that the tip section is not very flush with the rest of it. It's hard to say exactly where I went wrong, but the mortise and tenon fit is really tight. Take my word for it. So I think what this calls for is a little strategic shaping later on. Next, the segments get glued together. One way to tell if they're flat enough is by stacking them in a tower. If your tower is as stable as a graphite-regulated nuclear reactor, then you need to resurface. These 5 are ready for final surfacing. These 2 need to be resurfaced. The barrel side of the mortise segment is also good to go, but it requires some special attention. Now that everything's ready to be glued, I want to make sure that everything works the way it's supposed to. I loosened up the ledge on the inside so the ink cartridge has a little bit more play. I was going to round over the hole, but since I messed it up, I guess that's unnecessary. So you want to take the ink cartridge and put it through the hole in a couple different angles to see if it catches on any kind of ledge or anything like that, and if it does, then take a file to it and knock that out. Once you're satisfied with how everything is internally, go ahead and glue the mortise to the tenon. Once it's glued together, take the ink cartridge and your files and do what you did again and make sure it doesn't catch on anything. In the final product, the ink cartridge is just going to be dropped into the pen, and you don't want it to catch on anything, and the time to take care of anything like that is now, because later it's going to be a lot harder when it's glued together. When you glue the segments together, rotate the sections so the patterns alternate like this. Since I messed up the hole on the first segment, there's no real good way to align this. However, aligning the other segments is a little easier. I line up the stem segments with the 7/32 inch bit, which is just a little smaller than a 1/4 inch, and I count on that to line these up. Don't worry about the outside because it's going to be shaped anyway. Now that the glue's dried on these, I'm going to file out the inside and make sure they're wide enough to receive this 1/4 inch dowel. Now that you can get the dowel through the segments, you can align the pieces so that you can glue them. Not only have the pieces been glued, but the inside has been filed, and the back side slips on pretty easily and can fit pretty snugly on the front. You don't have to worry too much about the dowel being able to fit down the front because the dowel is not going to be able to get down that far normally. The dowel is going to be spending most of its life down here, and so this is where it really matters. You may be tempted to sand the dowel as opposed to filing the inside of the hole. Well, don't do that because the dowel comes a little wide, but it's straight. Your holes are narrow and crooked, so fix them first before you sand the dowel. So now to glue. It's finally together. You might notice that it's a little crooked. None of that's going to matter in the next step when I shape it. I cut out these 1/2 inch tenons, and in one I drilled a 3/32 inch bit and left the bit in, and the other I put a 1/4 inch hole and put a bit of the dowel in there. So they're inserted into the pen and they're going to help me shape it. Back to the sanding belt I go. The pen has been shaped. Now on to the next thing. The next step is drilling the bolt slot, and this is the most difficult part of this project. I know this because I've already messed up twice. If you do mess up the slot, there is a way to fix it. What you do is you take a 1/4 inch Forstner bit and you drill a very shallow hole. Then you take a 1/4 inch dowel and you stick it in there and you glue it. After that, you sand it over, and it's not exactly like it was, but since this is a laminate, it kind of blends in, and it's not as bad as if it were just like a solid piece. And if you mess up a really big section, you could do this. So you drill a hole, make a plug, glue it, sand it over, drill more holes over it, etc., and so on, and that's how you do that. By the way, I shaped the 2 decorative laminates. With the ink cartridge in, you want to push the dowel down just a little bit. This is going to be the starting point. There, you make a mark. Then you push the dowel all the way in and make a mark there. Make a mark about a 1/4 inch in on the dowel, and that's going to be where you're going to drill the hole for the rod to go. Line up the dowel with the edge of the pen and then make a mark here. Then move the dowel down to that second mark and make another mark there. When you make your marks on the pen, you want to make sure they fall within the lines and not exactly at the line. That'll give the pen a little bit more initial tension, and hopefully it'll make a click when it snaps up. From there, you want to go parallel to the edge of the pen. That mark is a little off, but that's okay because I can file that back later. I was going to drill these 2 holes as well as those other 3, but I think I'll skip that because that's what got me in trouble those other 2 times. And I'm going to take care of the rest with this little keyhole saw that I made. So, here I go again. Oh, one more thing. Before you drill the slot, make sure the ink cartridge is out. Before I get too much farther in, let me show you what I've done. I took the keyhole saw and connected the holes. Now I'm going back through with the file. Now this obviously is going to take some time, but I'd rather take time than screw it up again. I finished the slot and it works as intended. I drilled a hole in the dowel and put the rod in there, and I also used some food wax to lubricate the inside. That's going to be very helpful. So now to cut these two down to size and shape the tip. The tip has been shaped, and now all that's left is a final sanding, and it'll look a little like this. Here it is finished. Ha ha. All right, my pen is complete. Now to turn it in. Yeah, make a pen. Don't use a lathe. Email link, I can do that. Ha ha! Deadline. February 19th. Wait a minute. Well, I guess I won't be in the competition. I could have been a contender. But at least I got a pretty sweet pen out of it. Not to mention a pretty cool ebony ring I made from the scraps. Well, I think the one useful thing about failure is education. And if I've learned anything from this, it's not to procrastinate, and it's not to wait until an hour and a half before the deadline to figure out how to do the thing you're trying to do to win the contest. Maybe next time. Well, before I let you go, let me show you something amazing that not many people know about. Take a pen, draw 3 lines, right? Draw 3 more lines, okay? Connect these two. Make like a little diamond thing here. Bam, bam. You got yourself an S. But that's it. That's all there is. So this was fun. This is a bit different than what I normally do. What you're looking at now is what I normally do. I make pipes out of exotic hardwoods, like I said before. If you like what you see, subscribe and do all the stuff to all the things. My name's Gary, and I'm out.